It's the future. It's the future. There ain't no future unless we build it now. It's the future. It's the future. It's the future. There ain't no future unless we build it now. United States, Africa, we salute ya. A new state of mind, I introduce ya. Close your eyes and visualize the rise of a new paradigm. Solar powered skyscrapers.
Welcome to the Africa Must Unite podcast, a podcast dedicated to inspiring African people worldwide to rise up, organize, and struggle for Pan-Africanism, a unified, liberated, socialist Africa, the only permanent solution to the exploitation and oppression of African people, no matter where they happen to be born or happen to live in the world. Now please, welcome the hosts of Africa Must Unite.
Africa's future is now, so get ready.
Pan-African greetings, people. I am Brother Terrence of the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party.
And greetings, I'm Brother Neil Holmes of the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party.
All right, and we'd like to welcome you all to another Africa Must Unite podcast. This is number 57. Number 57 on deck. Brother Neil, would you like to get us started with some calendar dates on September?
Okay, yes, I will. September is a really revolutionary month. A number of very revolutionary Africans and others were born in this month. Samir Amin, revolutionary theorist, was born on September the 3rd, 1937. Geronimo Gijaga, also known as Geronimo Pratt, was born on September the 13th, 1947. George Jackson, revolutionary African fighting in the United States front against imperialism and racism, was born on September the 23rd, 1941. Lamine Janga from the Gambia, a young pioneer, and he was a young pioneer in Ghana. Later came to the United States to struggle with Africans in this country. Founding member of the PRSP, Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party, was born September the 15th, 1945. Winnie Mandela, South African freedom fighter, born September the 26th, 1936. And the man that we follow, his blueprint, the African who's put it all out there, Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, born September 18th, 1909. This is also a great month for Guinea-Bissau. Amilcar Cabral was born the 12th of September, 1924. The organization which he helped found, the PAIGC, was founded on the 19th of 1956. And then that organization led them to independence on September the 24th, 1973. We had quite a few of activities, revolutionary activities, advances during this month. On the 1st of September 1969, Muammar Gaddafi led a successful coup in Libya, progressive coup. Mozambique launched its armed struggle on the 25th of 1964. And Guinea voted the no vote to colonialism, left to independence on September the 28th, 1958. Lastly, we have some comrades that were extremely important revolutionaries who made their transition during this month. Ho Chi Minh of Vietnam passed on the 2nd, 1969, and Mao Zedong passed on the 9th, 1976. So these are some of the months from our calendar, the PRSP calendar. We'll have the next year's out fairly soon.
Yes. You know what? I try to hold dearly to the power in February with all of the history. But when you look at September and August too, but when you look at September, this month got some heavy hitters in here. So it's great information here. All right, brother Neil, and our listeners out there, we're going to get started. So, our whole theme this year has been the African world is on fire, and we've been looking at various places around the global Africa that impacts African people. And this month, we're going to head over into South America, into the largest country in South America, and that would be Brazil. So before we get into a discussion about Brazil, I want to open up with a piece that we wrote in the calendar about Brazil. We start off with a quote from Kwame Nkrumah, quote, all peoples of African descent, whether they live in North or South America, the Caribbean, or in any part of the world, are Africans and belong to the African nation, end quote. So Kwame Nkrumah said this in class Struggle in Africa, page 87. Brazil is the largest country in South America, and Africans make up over 55% of her population. Outside of Africa, it has the largest African population in the world. Brazil, which in 1888 was the last country in the Western Hemisphere to abolish slavery, has tried to cover up the appalling conditions of African people by presenting itself as a racial democracy. By this, they mean that because there were a large number of racially mixed people in Brazil, that there was no problem with racism. However, the facts tell us otherwise. 75% of the poorest people in Brazil are African, where they are often crowded into dilapidated slums, which are called favelas. Africans receive only about a half of what workers take home in wages. Police repression is especially brutal. Africans make up almost 80% of those killed by the police. In the spring of 2021, 28 Africans were killed by the police in one weekend in the Hacirazinho favela. Increasingly, Africans in Brazil are rejecting the idea of racial democracy and embracing their African heritage. To make matters worse, the current president, Jair Bolsonaro, is an extreme right-winger in the same mode as Donald Trump. During his election campaign, he repeatedly referred to Africans in the most racist of terms. He has not taken the COVID-19 pandemic seriously, resulting in massive death, especially among the African community. The Coalition of Black Rights, a coalition of 150 African organizations, has charged Bolsonaro with genocide for his handling of the pandemic. One day it will become clear to the African masses of Brazil that Pan-Africanism is the only permanent solution to our problems. And when it does, they will make even a greater contribution to the African Revolution. Yes, that is our calendar piece for the 2022 calendar as we get ready to head into this discussion about Brazil. You know, Brother Neil, the more I've read about Brazil and look at some research, it awfully mirrors the United States in its imperialist capitalist ways. We're going to get to that today. So, Brother Neil, who has done extensive study on Brazil, will give us some feedback, will give us some information about Brazil. First question I want to ask you is discuss the enemy presence in Brazil today. We know that enemy is neo-colonialism, but can you or give us some background about Brazil? Let's do that first.
Well, like you say, you know, that Brazil in many ways has a lot of the same characteristics of the United States and even South Africa in many ways, and that's because it's also not only a neo-colony, but it's a settler colony. Yes. Which means that you had these settlers coming from Europe and taking the land from the native people, the indigenous people, bringing Africans over to do the heavy work. And much of the settlement is not only old, but much of it's new. A lot of the settlement came after World War II. and some of it came in the 20s in order to really, they were trying to rebalance the, so to speak, the African population because it was so huge. If they hadn't had that new immigration from the 20s and 30s, and especially the 40s onward, you know, what we talk about, this 56% African population would be even larger. So it's a settler colony, and like all settler colonies, the most unequal societies in the world are settler colonies. And they're also the most violent places in the world in terms of state violence. So you're going to see in Brazil, it's got the largest African population, like the calendar says, outside of Africa itself, and also, like the calendar said, it has a tremendous amount of state violence. 80% of all those killed, almost 80% of all those killed by the police are African. Africans earn, like we said, just a little over 50% of what whites earn. The same as what we do in this country. And the United States imperialism and militarism has a particularly close relationship with Brazil. For instance, the police, and we say this is one of the most deadly police forces anywhere in the world. This police force was trained by the LAPD. You know, the same police force that brought us Rodney King and all and other forms of high tech policing and deadly policing.
The battle ram. That's what I think of with the LAPD. The introduction of the battery ram.
Oh yeah, the battery ram. The whole SWAT kind of teams.
SWAT, absolutely.
Those armored carriers, all of that stuff. That whole militarized police force with heavy military equipment and so forth. And the LAPD introduced militarized policing all around the world. Brazil, Vietnam during the Vietnam War and so forth. So it's that what the Panthers used to say was this occupying army of the police force that has been taught to the police force in Brazil by the police forces in the United States, from the United States. The military, the Brazilian military, gets the similar kind of support whenever there's any attempt or any movement toward the left. And when I say movement toward the left, movement toward a situation where the masses of people's lives are consciously made better. When that begins to happen, then the U.S. military cranks up its relationship to the Brazilian military. There was a coup in 1964 because the people had begun to vote to move in a certain direction. All this was legal that they were doing, and the military moved in, killed thousands of people. They removed elected officials, thousands of them, and they began to disappear people. And by disappearing people, what we mean, people were all of a sudden, you see someone in the neighborhood there, you didn't see them anymore. Thousands of people, all of a sudden, nobody ever knew where they were. So this was the situation that was forced on the Brazilian people and backed by the militarism, the imperialist militarism of the United States. Yes. When we look at Brazil today, we talk about this fellow Bolsonaro, who's the current president. He's in a tough race right now, and when he ran for president the first time, he openly disparaged African people, called us lazy, all the old tropes, lazy, good for nothing, fat and greasy, all these kinds of things were things that he was saying. And once he got in there, paid no attention or utilized, some people say, this is why he's been charged with genocide, and that case is going forward, and they're trying to take that case now to the international court. But the genocide court, the African organizations in Brazil, let that virus flow. Has the second largest death rate after the United States, again, with this COVID-19. Some people refer to him as the Donald Trump of Brazil. But one thing we should point out is that even though he was considered to be the Donald Trump of Brazil and the greatest danger to democracy in this hemisphere, or in the South America, let's say, at the recent Summit of the Americas that the United States hosted, Joe Biden made a big deal of saying, well, we're not going to invite the Cubans, we're not going to invite the Venezuelans and so forth.
Nicaragua.
He invited that Donald Trump, that other fascist.
Absolutely.
So that there is among the imperialist bourgeoisie that pretty much run the country, they are united around this question of supporting that leadership in Brazil, that reactionary leadership.
You brought up. Excuse me. You can continue.
Oh no, I'm
you just brought up that election that's taking place. That will be October 2nd. So he's running against Da Silva, who they say has socialist leanings. Was very close to Hugo Chavez in the early 2000s. I was just looking that up and noticed that they said Da Silva is winning, so it may be the end, but they don't know if Bolsonaro may pull a Trump and refuse to leave office. So we need to stay in tune with that and just see what's going to go on with that in these next couple of weeks.
Well, he's already saying that.
Wow.
He's already saying that if I don't lose, the stuff that is, he's using the same playbooks.
Same.
But the thing that we really have to look out for is that the police and military in Brazil are extremely politicized, political. They have their own representatives in the government, and like historically, if things go against their direction, they sometimes come out and do their thing. Lula right now, who's running for the presidency, is pretty progressive. Leans toward sort of a democratic socialist kind of thing. Has done some things that have created some space for Africans to organize in the country and indigenous people to organize in the country. So hopefully that goes fairly well. But that guy Bolsonaro is really a very dangerous guy. I mean, when we talk about anything from COVID-19 to the rainforest in Amazon getting cut down, and when those rainforests get cut down, it's not just merely people just cutting the trees down, but there are people that live there, especially indigenous people and some Africans who live there. And you have these violent gangs who come out and push them off of their lands where they live, violently killing them and so forth, in the search for gold, sometimes trying to turn rainforests into places to graze cattle. The beef largely ending up in the United States. United States has a huge market for this Brazilian beef. So those are some of the problems there. When you go up north in Brazil, you're up in the going up north is something like going down south here, because when you go up north, you're in the plantation zone where the concentration of slavery was. And you're still in those rural areas, you still have some of those old relations going on where people are dealt with. But you also have, on the other side, you have the strongest maintenance of those African cultural things that we do. And that's, in terms of things like candomblé, the sort of the African traditional religion and the music and so forth. To get that political is and just not culture is one of the struggles that's currently going on.
You're right. Can you speak on the presence of the women as well as the youth presently in Brazil?
The women, you have two aspects to it. On the one hand, the violence against women is really at a extremely high level. Again, as in a settler colony, you're going to have that, but it's extremely high. And African women, they experience about between 75 and 80% of all the violence that's there, in both domestic, quote unquote, violence and state violence, violence from the state. At the same time, women are playing a major role in the political situation in Brazil. And one of the women leaders are saying, that in fact, we are the ones who put the left in the left. We're the ones that make the left, because right. The women are taking the lead around this question. The old left, the old Brazilian left, reduced everything to class, and they bought into this notion, which was put forward first by really a fascist leadership in Brazil, that Brazil is basically a racial democracy, that we've had all this racial mixing, and we're all brown and all of this stuff. And the fact is that when you look at the data, Africans are catching more hell than anybody else in society. And you also had this racial kind of hierarchy with the whiter you are, the farther you are up on this thing, the darker you are, the lower you are on this thing.
Right.
And sometimes Africans buy into that stuff. And so this is one of the struggles that women are raising in particular, and the youth are raising in particular, around breaking through this whole this color thing. And now so instead of talking about what they call brown and black, they all saying we're all talking about black, and then and our job is to get everybody to talk about we're all talking about African. But so this question about being brown versus being black, and even the fact that if you get money you can become white, and you become white. These are the kind of ideological things that have to be broken through in order to, and women are playing a major role in doing that. The situation of women, though, in terms of economics, again, sort of like about almost between 1 out of 5, a little more than 1 out of 5 of all women are maids, and only recently have they gotten any rights, and this occurred during the last presidency, any rights to minimum wage, overtime after 44 hours, and these sorts of things. The other thing about our sisters in Brazil, like sisters around the world, but particularly in Brazil, there's a way in which they have been objectified, and sexualized, as especially to these men coming to Brazil, tourism. So you have this sexualized image of African women as these available women that are always there to somehow satisfy these visitors when they come to town. So this kind of image is there. And at the same time, in the reality, as settler colonialism tends to do, it breaks up families, whereas women and children tend to live apart quite often from men. And so these are all problems. Among the youth, we're beginning to see them taking a really lead around a couple of questions, around the questions of identity, a particular question, and also around the question of beginning to use African culture in particular as organizing tool in the favelas, in these slum areas, which are really very compact. Very often you have very little sanitation and stuff in there. And so they are often taking the lead in these sorts of things. This opening to Africa is also, and to the rest of the world is also the lead is being taken about the youth. At the same time, they're taking that lead. The youth are again, especially black young men, are really victims of a lot of violence. They're the top victims of violence. They're about 150% more likely to die, African men, than anybody else, any other men in the society, and particularly the youth. Some of this is due to the informal economy in terms of the drug business. Drug business is huge. Cocaine is still big. Crack is still big, and the lumpen kind of drug lords are highly armed, heavily armed. Sometimes they suppress political organizing in their communities that they tend to dominate. So things, sometimes if you're an organizer, you're somewhere stuck between the police on the one hand and the crime lords on the other hand. But also this informal economy, you're working on the street vending and so forth. That can be dangerous. A brother from the Congo was recently killed. He came from the Congo. He could speak Portuguese, came there. He could vending on the street, went to his white bosses, asked for his pay, and he was brutally beaten to death by 5 of those white bosses because they didn't want to pay him in the broad daylight, on the street. So the informal economy, whether you're talking about something like drugs and stuff, or just vending, street vending, and that sort of thing, it all can be a little on the dangerous side. So this organizing is taking place. Increasingly, we're seeing immigration in from the Congo, from Angola, these kinds of places, and so that's going to heighten also some of these contradictions around identity, and a Pan-African leadership and Nkrumah's leadership really would be is really what's necessary in Brazil right now.
Right. I know you mentioned earlier that the youth are really looking at and attacking this idea of identity. And we know there are some progressive movements and organizations or groups taking place in Brazil. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, there are quite a few. And as the calendar mentioned, one of the things that's really very that gives you a lot of hope for Brazil, and one of the things that we can learn quite a bit from in Brazil is the way in which they have developed these popular fronts. For instance, the Coalition for Black Rights, which you mentioned in the calendar, an organization of 150 other organizations. You have a number of women's organizations. The group Nzinga, named after Queen Nzinga. The group of black women. Another such organization, women's organization. There is a growing Quilombist movement. The Quilombos were established during the time of slavery itself, and these were towns that were set up by Africans who had been able to escape the plantation, along with indigenous people, and even sometimes you had poor whites live in these villages. The leadership was African, and the word Quilombo is a Bantu sort of word that has a Bantu root, which means basically a warrior town, And so Quilombos, there are 3,500 Quilombos still exist. The largest one was named Palmares, and it had about 15,000 members, 15,000 residents when at its height. So you have
in Colombia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went to Palmares. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have them. And we even had them here. You have them all over the enslaved world over here in the West. But there are about 3,500 of them, and they're going through a kind of rejuvenation. But the idea of Quilombo ism as community resistance is catching on in all kinds of communities. Their communities are organizing themselves to resist as communities. So this is a very important. Also, you have one of the important organizations. You know, you have a lot of people who are being pushed off of the land, and one of the very important movements is the movement of rural landless workers, and that movement has about 500,000 people. And not only is it active in Brazil, but it also is active. It has connected to Africans who are also dealing with landless issues of land in South Africa. They've done some connections with people in Zimbabwe. So it has a Pan-African connection, and it is kind of a rural organization, anti-imperialist, pro-socialist. And lastly, you have a number of different, leftists and left-leaning socialist, communist organizations throughout the country. And increasingly, this question of being something, this struggle is being something more than just your traditional class struggle, but it includes the question of settler colonialism, the question of the indigenous people, the question of Africans and our particular way that we have gotten here through enslavement, and what it's going to take, and also this relationship to Africa. All these questions are now more open, more bubbling up, and more open to resolution.
Right. That, and that's the conditions are causing people to step up and organize themselves. So it's good to hear that on Brazil and what's happening in Brazil. Brother Neil, you hit us with some heavy information here, and the people appreciate it. Was there anything else you want to say about Brazil before we move on?
Yeah, I just want to say a few things.
Yeah.
As a Pan-Africanist, Brazil is extremely important, and we really need to know what's going on. We need to keep ourselves aware of what's going on. We need to, as Pan-Africanists, to fight every day for an organization similar to the one that Nkrumah called for, the All-African Committee for Political Coordination, where we can begin to maximize in a strategic way all of our efforts, no matter where we are and no matter what organizations we're in, as long as we have a principal relationship to this objective for a Pan-African and total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. One of the things, too, we need to really do, I think, is we really, as revolutionaries and as concerned Africans, begin to take language training seriously. This American United States kind of idea that arrogance, that you don't have to know anything but English, and because you're the big deal in the world, we can't let that become our mantra too. And even for those of us, when you get older, it's harder, but we need to really, especially get our youth, because they can learn languages, and get them involved in learning some of these other European languages, Portuguese, French, etc., Spanish, and also some of our own languages, our own African languages, so we can communicate and communicate directly with each other without having someone else interpret and maybe misinterpret, and that way we can get directly. Lastly, I think as Nkrumahs, we really need to communicate as much as possible the Nkrumah's ideology to Brazil and places like that, because you have all of these pieces that are really coming together, and that Nkrumah's ideological mindset can take these pieces and pull them together in a coherent and systemic way, which really can push our people forward. Because Brazil has a way that it can relate directly, either through Portuguese language or through some of these traditional things, because this is a South-South relationship between one country in the global South related to another country in the global South, where Brazil itself is fairly industrialized. If it was revolutionary and progressive and Pan-African, it could really play a major role in helping Africa to industrialize and unify.
Right. And like we say on the calendar here, only a unified socialist Africa can extinguish it. And that's global Africans from Brazil all the way over to the motherland.
That's right.
Powerful words today, Brother Neil. We would like to say all throughout 2022, if you've been tuning in here at the times with invited guests, our focus will continue to be on the African world being on fire. We are highlighting the current reality of these places throughout the world, from Libya to Ethiopia, from the Congo to Tanzania, and from Haiti to Brazil, and to the United Snakes at that. What's the next place we're looking at, Brother Neil?
Well, we want each of our listeners to, and invite some of your friends as well to join us next month, and we will discuss the current reality of Haiti.
Yes, indeed. Meanwhile, visit our website, PanAfricanRevolutionarySocialistParty.org. That's all one word, PanAfricanRevolutionarySocialistParty.org. You can email us at PanAfricanRSP@gmail.com. Like us on SoundCloud, visit us on YouTube, and leave comments on our Facebook, which is Pan-African Socialists.
Remember, organization is the key. Join us, the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party, or some other revolutionary Pan-African socialist organization. A union of African socialist states was on the horizon.
El suceso ocurrió en Nueva York. Supuestamente contenían marihuana y crack, según la versión policial. En el video se ve claramente que no había nada.
La patrulla me está vigilando, está pendiente de todo lo que hago. La patrulla me está vigilando, está pendiente de todo lo que hago. Para poder estar.
En la nación creada sobre la espalda de gente robada, donde la espada de los que llegaban mataban las tribus que aquí ya estaban. Así a través de la arma, a través de conquista, un imperio surgió. Con la mano de obra barata se construyó esta gran nación. La misma que hoy discrimina, mira que se le niega justicia. Ven te invito, mira la cifra, tú y yo estamos a la misma. Sin empleo, te miran feo, pero no creo en el noticiero. El que quiere convencerte, que viva la vida con miedo. Del negro, del inmigrante, criminales que quieren matarte, terroristas que están en la lista. Cuidado que van a escucharte, más bien es conquistarte. Más fácil explotarte, la muerte o la cárcel. Mira el caso de Trayvon Martin.
La patrulla me está vigilando, está pendiente de todo lo que hago. La patrulla me está vigilando, está pendiente de todo lo que hago. Para poder estar.
Siempre sigo siendo el enemigo de la policía. Siempre sigo siendo MC, Rodrigo de Rebeldías. Y no somos los únicos que siempre tenemos el puño arriba. Somos muchos, miles, millones, los que luchamos por la justicia. Quiero hablar de Ramarley Graham, shot in front of his brother Grams. Quiero hablar de John Collado, la policía lo asesinaron. Oscar Grant tomaba el tren, el próximo día se casaba Sean Bell. Hilton Vega, Anthony Rosario, Anthony Valle lo mataron. Amadou Diallo only had a wallet. Trayvon Martin couldn't go to college. Rekia boy, all I gotta say is Rekia boy. They killed that boy, King Money Great. And all these rappers got nothing to say. Like it's okay that the girls go off and the kids get popped.
ni siquiera me pueden a mí explicar. Todavía no entiendo qué clase de crimen cometido para que me hagan cuestionar. ¿Sabe cómo sospechoso? Pues enseñamos la prueba y el crimen que yo hice, señor oficial. ¿Será por la forma en que me veo, por la forma de mi caminar? No sé. ¿Será por odio racial o será por nuestra seguridad? No sé. Lo único que yo sé y la única cosa que también entender, lo que ustedes están creando se llama de confianza y seguridad en contra de la sociedad. Pero la pregunta más importante es que con esto la delincuencia parará. O siempre este número dará todo su sentido y la lista de ellos aumentará. Son muchas preguntas pero sin respuesta que nosotros tenemos que preguntar. Es hora de tomar acción, de meter presión o si no, no nos responderá.
La patrulla me está vigilando, está pendiente de todo lo que hago. La patrulla me está vigilando, está pendiente de todo lo que hago. Para poder estar, para poder estar. La patrulla, la patrulla, la patrulla, la patrulla.
Perjudica especialmente a la población